I'm going to start. A number of people may be joining us as we carry on, but I'd like to begin on time. Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this session today about fundraising for your church's core costs. My name is Cathy Shimon and I am the Senior Training Consultant and Performance Coach with Directory of Social Change. Title I resent a little bit, you know, the senior says either something about my age or how long I've been around. So, you know, I'll suck that one up. My purpose here today is just to host. Ecclesiastical, it's their gig. They've, you know, commissioned this training and organised this training to put on for you. We're here to help them do that. And that's what Directory of Social Change do. We try and help you to help the others that you're helping. So my role here today is as host and tech host, and I'll be watching the Q&A coming in and anything that you might be putting in the chat. And I'll also be gathering up those questions and putting those to Jill and Andrew later on. Any other housekeeping things? We'll you know, Andrew and Jill speak for about 15 or 20 minutes each, and then we'll open up to Q&A. So the last part of the session will definitely be Q&A there for you. You'll only see the person speaking on screen for most of the time, and then when we come back to Q&A, obviously we'll have both Andrew and Jill here. Now I will let Andrew and Jill make their own introductions when it comes to it, but just so that you know, Jill is an independent freelance consultant and works regularly with Directory of Social Change with her organisation Achieve Consultants. And Andrew is the senior consultant with the philanthropy company, and they'll tell you a little bit more about what they do. We also have with us today from Ecclesiastical Lucy Hanscombe, who's going to just give you a little bit of an overview about what Ecclesiastical are doing at the moment. And again, she'll tell you a little bit more about her role here today and the things that she can share with you. I think that's it. I always start with a bit of a disclaimer and a guarantee, don't I? So the disclaimer is I'll shut up now and won't speak until I need to bring questions to you. And my guarantee is that Jill and Andrew will have stacks of tips to be able to offer you. So keep your pen and paper to hand. The important thing, the slides and the recording will be on the Ecclesiastical Fundraising Hub afterwards. So you'll be able to go and look at that, but we don't send the slides separately. The slides will be in the recording that you'll be able to watch. Okay, so I think that's practical things as well. Anything I've forgotten before we hand over to Lucy? No. Good, then let me hand you over to Lucy and she'll take it from here and then hand you over to Jill. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you very much, Cathy, and good afternoon, everyone. I can't see you, but I'm assured that you're there. So good afternoon, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. It's a pleasure to have you. So as Cathy's already said, my name is Lucy Hanscombe. I am the Customer Services Manager for our Church Operations Department at Ecclesiastical. So it's my department that you'll be talking to if you call in with any of your church-related queries. And I'm very happy to be here to welcome you to the webinar today. So I'll be with you for the first few minutes and then leave you with Cathy, Jill, Andrew and their capable hands for the remainder of the session. So why has all of this come about, really? So we recognise that fundraising is a really essential part of church life, and also that it isn't the easiest thing to do some of the time. So we took the decision as a business to invest in a range of resources to support churches with their fundraising activities at the beginning of the pandemic. But as we begin to emerge from the pandemic, we're continuing to develop these resources to make sure that we're evolving as your needs evolve, looking at how you can meet the needs of your day-to-day running costs, but also generating fundraising for projects, etc. Next slide, please, Cathy. So I'm very pleased to say that this webinar is just one of the many resources that we've developed to help your church. So our online fundraising hub contains lots of other resources. I think you're going to have some signposting there throughout the presentation, which includes things like templates, tips, and lots of different lots of different forms and things that can help you on your way. So you can see the web address on your screen now. On the hub, you'll also find the recordings of our other 5 previous fundraising sessions. And just for reassurance, you don't need to have watched the other episodes in the series to benefit from today's session. So in addition to the material on our website that we'll be referencing in part today, we've also set up a dedicated fundraising helpline for you to get guidance and further support from our church insurance consultants, which I'll come back to in a little bit. So please do get in touch, again, using the phone number that you can see on your screen if you've got any questions on fundraising in the future, because we'd love to hear from you. Next slide, please, Kathy. Okay, so in addition to what we've got on the fundraising hub and the fundraising helpline that we have, we've got a wide range of extra support and guidance that's available for our ecclesiastical church customers. So hopefully many of you will have seen our fundraising in a box printed toolkit, which we sent out to all of our church customers at the beginning of last year, which contains 4 booklets to guide you step by step through fundraising processes, as well as posters and templates that you can use day to day when you're going on this journey. If you're an ecclesiastical customer, but you haven't received a fundraising in a box kit, for whatever reason, if there's been a change of people at your church, then please do get in touch with us after the webinar and we can arrange for another one to be sent out to you. So on the right hand side of your screen now, I did make reference to our church insurance consultants on the previous slide. The team that you can see in the photo here, looking lovely, are our team of church insurance consultants who are based all around the UK and regularly attend and speak at events, deliver training, as well as providing a local point of contact for all of our church customers. The team have very wide, broad experience in their careers. They have an in-depth knowledge of insurance and risk management matters, but they also have a real passion for churches, what you do, and trying to make that as easy as possible. So if you'd like to find out a little bit more about what the church insurance consultants can do to help you, you'll see there's an email address on the screen, and they'd love to hear from you. The final slide, please, Kathy. Thank you. So to the topic of discussion for today, we're delighted to be presenting this webinar in collaboration with Directory of Social Change, a charity themselves who've been providing support and training to charities and churches for over 40 years. Our speakers today, as you've already been introduced by Kathy, are Jill Jolly and Andrew Evans, who between them have over 50 years of experience in fundraising and have worked with a wide range of organisations and churches over those years. At the end of the session, there'll be plenty of time, hopefully, if all goes well, for a good Q&A. And we'll be recording the session, so don't worry if you think you've missed anything. As Kathy said, it'll all go up on our fundraising hub, so you can revert back to it going forward if that would be helpful. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jill to start her section.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. That's lovely to have that introduction from Lucy and just hear about all the incredible resources Ecclesiastical have now and are continuing to develop. Things that you will find on the fundraising hub. There's the special church section, but there's a range of other things across the whole of the fundraising hub that are really relevant. I know I've met some of you in a virtual sense through some of the other webinars that I've been part of, and we've got some more coming up in the future, some involving me and Andrew, other people as well. So do keep your eyes peeled as to what also is going to come up to help you develop your knowledge, your skills, but also help you so that you can implement these things and get better at what it is that you're raising, better in terms of your fundraising and what you're wanting to actually raise money for in your church communities. So let me just put that up. There we are, just in case I was having a bad hair day. We've got a slide with me slightly tidier hair on that one, but that's not a big worry. But just to remind you, do make the most of the chat to talk to each other. Also, if I or Andrew later is saying something that you think, hey, I've got something I can share. So please, if you've got a good website that's really informative, or you've got a funder, stick it in there. Do share that with each other. So keep your eye on the chat box and share things with each other. And do remember, the question and answer little button is the one that Kathy will be keeping an eye on, and will be posing questions from that or anything that you submitted in advance with your registration that Andrew and I will try and sort of guide you through. So just to reiterate, to say, Kathy introduces, I am Jill Jolly, so yes, can't ever be miserable. And my background, goes back many, many years, working with lots of different community and voluntary organisations in the whole of the not-for-profit sector. So yes, I've worked with lots and lots of churches as well, cathedrals, and my last particular big project was something that I was doing with the Heritage Alliance, where we had lots of people through the Rebuilding Heritage programme, that I was actually advising. So it's a great honour to be with you today to share some thoughts and hopefully give you some real helpful hints and tips, but also stimulate some thoughts that help you understand what are the options or opportunities that might exist for you out there. So in terms of what we're talking about today, we're particularly focusing on core costs. So what do we actually mean by core costs? Well, these are different for every church group, but some common expenditure are things such as heating, lighting, other utility bills. It might be your music license, your internet access, your insurance, your other expenses that perhaps are being incurred by possibly some of your parochial church council, your property group, or whatever. It may be salary costs for your minister, your or vicar, your pastor. It could be other salary costs for a youth worker, for a community development officer. It might be stationary. I know we're trying to do a lot electronically these days, but not everyone's is able to access things electronically. So perhaps we still have some good old paper and envelopes, some postage. So all of those things, but also other necessary items such as washing up liquid, tea, coffee. And we can't not mention toilet rolls, except perhaps some of you who are desperate to actually, you've no toilets at your church. But we're going to be doing another session. The date for the diary is the 16th of June, and that's all going to be concentrated on capital costs and capital projects. So this session today, the sessions that advice and help that Andrew are going to be giving you today is all about core costs. And so just trying to help understand what some of these things are. So when I'm trying to explain what I mean by core costs, I like to use my Jammy Dodger model. And I actually like to reword it. So rather than using the term core costs or project costs, I like to think about direct and indirect costs. So if we think about that Jammy Dodger, and if you're trying to imagine what the biscuit is, stop imagining, just look, we've got a nice image here on the screen. And what I always say is, if you're actually having a bite of a biscuit, that Jammy Dodger, you want a bit of biscuit and some of the jam. It might just be a bit boring if you only have the biscuit, but in order to make it tasty, make it work for you, you need a bit of the jam as well. And that's what I like to think of as in terms of expenditure and funding needs within an organisation. So I like to think of the biscuit bit where I'm putting my cursor now, that little arrow. That is the direct costs of any particular piece of work or anything you're doing. And here in the middle is the jammy bit. So let's just, for example, say that you actually are looking for some funding to continue the contract of a youth worker. Very much salary costs, core costs. But let's think of it as direct and indirect. So the direct costs will be that salary, the national insurance, the tax. But then there's an element of some of the indirect costs. This person has got a laptop, Now that might be direct because possibly when they started, you as a church provided them with some equipment. But in order to use that, they need an internet license. So that is part of that jammy bit. So this is it. So every time you have a look at any particular funding needs, think of it as a bite out of a jammy dodger. Don't just look for the direct costs. When you're looking for direct costs, have an element of some of those indirect costs when you're approaching funders, donors, whoever, when you're setting a target, but also when you're actually working out the costs that are needed to have that youth worker, as I've used in this example. So remember, it's not just those direct costs, the salary, perhaps some expenses for them to go on the train or a bus or to run a vehicle to actually get out and about to meet other youth organisations, whatever. Think of it as a whole element of some direct, but also some indirect costs. So what we need to do then is when we're looking for support and funding to actually help us with costs such as this, we need to tap into the psychology of giving. And when we're actually approaching anyone, we need to think about how we ask. And we don't just actually ask, can you actually give us money for actually the cost to employ for another 12 months our youth worker? What you might say is, there's a real issue in our community about lack of resources and places for young people to go. At times, we're really worried that they can be sucked into gangs and get involved in lots of antisocial behaviour. We have found that having a youth club and some other youth activities or activities aimed particularly at the youth in our community has really helped to actually cut down some of the knife crime or the gang culture around here. In order to continue the valuable work, we want you, whoever our funder is that we're approaching, our donor, we want you to actually help us to ensure the youth in our community have the best chance of a good start at the moment. So this is it. So don't ask for money, ask for help with a particular area. So in that case, we might be asking for help to ensure that young people in our community have something worthwhile to get involved with. It might be we're looking to actually open up. It might be you're looking for heating so that you can have your youth groups such as Scouts, Boys Brigade, or whatever. It might be you want to start a particular youth club, or you might even want to have, I say, more other activities such as, I say, perhaps brownies, guides, whatever, also have the opportunity. So think about what you actually achieve, not what you actually do. And don't just think of it as a youth worker. Think about what that youth worker will actually achieve. So again, you might want money. I'm not going to say for a kitchen extension, we're saving things like that to the 16th of June, remember. But you might actually want money, you say, for some of those other core costs. It's about your heating, your lighting. But you say, we have regular opportunities, not just when we've had a service, but about connecting people in our community so that they're not lonely, so they're not isolated, that they have the opportunity to meet. We want them to do that in a nice, warm, comfortable environment with over a cup of tea or a coffee. So you say you're actually asking for funds to actually help with your social gatherings, not just heating and lighting and some money for the coffee fund. So what I want to share is some thoughts this afternoon, and what we're aiming to do is ensure between Andrew and I, we cover some initial points. So hopefully some of those questions that you were wanting to ask will get covered, and then we'll have half an hour. Our aim is by 3 o'clock, we'll be tackling some of those questions that you've got. So quick slide, and remember you can get all of these. These are going to be on the Ecclesiastical Fundraising Hub, if not immediately afterwards, but a short time afterwards. So go and have a look at these. So I just say this quick slide just to get you thinking. There's 5 ways to actually increase the income. We talk about voluntary income. It's not coming from a government source. It's not your local authority. We're thinking about how you can generate money. So you can attract more donors. That can be individuals, it could be all sorts of things. So I'm going to talk very quickly and show you a slide about all the different sources of funds in a minute. It can be about encouraging existing donors to make larger gifts. Now, I know Margaret at St. Peter's in Leeds, she's just had a refusal for a large gift. But anyway, we'll talk about trusts and foundations later. It's about increasing the regularity of each donor's gift. So possibly someone gives twice a year, they might actually start to give 4 times a year. Prolong the length of time a donor actually gives to you for. So you might find on average people give for 5 years. Well, let's try and actually extend that. And the other way of my quick 5 tips is make the gift tax effective. And again, don't worry, we're going to come back to that. So picking up on one of those threads, let's think about is there, and I can't think of a church that I know that hasn't got some sort of a regular giving scheme. So are you maximizing that? Are you sharing it with people? This is the way that they can support. You might have done some promotion about this pre-COVID when people, perhaps, came to the church for the first time, or perhaps you didn't like to ask them the first time, when they perhaps been coming for 5 or 6 times, you wanted to start sharing. We do have a regular giving scheme, but just think about how you can promote that. And you might not have been doing that for a while. I know some organisations like to have a giving day where you might actually think about an extra gift, but also at that opportunity, that's a chance to say, well, why don't you sign up to a small but regular gift? That's really useful to us because we know that money is going to come in this month, next month, or at the period that a donor, a supporter, one of your congregation members chooses to give it. So just think about, are you maximising those opportunities, is there? And there's some pointers there on the slide. But as in the last slide, and then the last point on this, excluding the etc., is, are you doing it tax effectively? Again, I know loads of people know all about gift aid, but just think, are we maximising it? And if you don't know about gift aid, you might be one of those organisations that's missing out on literally the millions that is going unclaimed. But I love gift aid because, as it says here, it enables donors to increase the contribution they make to the charity or your organisation. I'm thinking of you as a church and charity interchangeable, but at no extra cost to themselves if they are a UK taxpayer. And it's just like magic. £1 suddenly becomes £1.25 at the moment. So basically, when someone has earned that pound, they have given or had taken out of it income tax, or possibly, say, if you had that money generated through capital gains, you say by selling something, then capital gains tax takes a chunk out of it. Then you say gift aid is where the donor gives permission for the tax that they've paid on that money to be reclaimed by your church. So on the whole, yes, people have to be a taxpayer. That is the basic rule of thumb with that. But, and yes, I know, and I definitely know from what we've seen, there are some treasurers that have said, oh my goodness, though, Jill, it's a bit of hard work. Over the years, this started way back in the 90s. John Major was the Chancellor of the Exchequer who actually introduced gift aid many, many years ago. And it's been simplified much over the years. And the process of actually doing the tax reclaims has been simplified. I'm not going to go into that now. We've not got the time for that. But, it has been made an awful lot simpler. So even though, yes, there is a small amount of work, but also with a smaller amount of claim work with the forms that need to be completed or the declarations that people have to make. So do make sure you are maximising the opportunities when you've got additional visitors coming into your churches. So this is it, at weddings, at blessings, renewal of vows, all these other things where you've got extra visitors. They might not be regular visitors or part of your congregation, but again, they want to show their appreciation, the fact you were there to help at a time of celebration or a time of bereavement. I always think of that as a celebration of life, but at these key times, and many of those people want to make a contribution at that time. So think about the ways that you can do that. There are things such as QR codes, and on one of my webinars, previous ones I've done with Ecclesiastical, we talked about those in much more detail. Text to give, it's very easy to get a text to give set up. We've got a lovely picture here of a vicar with a contactless donation pot. And I myself was up in the Lake District only a couple of weeks ago and popped into a church whilst I was sort of out for a walk. And I loved it to see. We didn't have that nice smiling face, but there was a contactless donation opportunity. So I got a card with me because I was going to also have a coffee while I was out and about. So again, I popped in, so did actually make a donation there. Also think about, we as churches like to get involved with other causes. It's part of what we do. You know, we've just come through out of the Christian Aid Week. Many of you will be supporting Tear Fund. There's the Children's Society you might be partnering with. So just think about whether you can do some split fundraising or partnership fundraising. So rather than give all of it and have a collection for Christian Aid or an event, you might hold a coffee morning, you might hold a concert or whatever. Andrew's going to talk about lots more specific ideas for you later on. But rather than say, right, well, 100% of this is going to go to this particular charity, you might say, well, 70% will go to that charity and we're going to keep 30% ourselves to actually help with some of our running costs so that we're here this year, but also we're here next year and in future years. So I did promise you that we'd come to look at those sources of funds. So these are the sources. We've already talked about a couple of methods of people or organisations giving under them, but statutory sources. Just think, is there a reason why a statutory body might have a reason to make a contribution or give a grant towards you? Many of you will be in a parish, local parishes. Again, I live in a parish in Suffolk at the moment. And again, our parish council gives out all sorts of very small grants to community organisations, providing facilities and activities in our community, in our village community. So it could well be you can tap into something from one of those statutory sources, whether it's the local council, the borough or the district council, whether it's the county council or regional council, you might be part of a unitary authority, or it might be one of those, say, parishes. Companies, there's lots of reasons companies might want to get involved with you, and there's an opportunity for them. The community in its own right. So we've talked about you as a church and the activities that you do to support other causes, but it could well be that the school might want to do an activity and raise some money to give. Even they may do split fundraising. They do something, but then give some money to you as a church organisation, especially if it's a church school as well. There are other community organisations, book clubs, reading clubs, yoga groups, Rotary, Round Table, Ladies Circle, WI. Again, they may use your church hall, your facilities. But again, just we'll talk about earned income later, but I say they may also see you as an organisation they could make a contribution towards. There's so many ways individuals can support. And yes, those regular giving schemes, that's individuals giving money, and we hope in a tax effective way if it's appropriate to them. But again, we don't want to think about the end of life, but what do they say? There's nothing more certain than life than death and taxes. So it could well be that we just, have an opportunity just to say people support us during their lifetime, and also many people choose to leave as a gift in their will. Or they might actually nominate us for the collection at their funeral. Or they might want to split that between a cause that's been close to them during their life and your church as, again, another focal point in their lives. So there's lots and lots of ways that individuals can get involved. Again, go and have a look at some of the things we've had on other webinars. Grant-making bodies, there's grant-making trusts and foundations. I know some of you, the lottery might be a difficult thought, but again, the lottery exists. Heritage Lottery Fund, which is part of that, but also the Landfill Communities Fund. There's grant-making bodies that exist, that they're there to give money away. But again, they've got very strict criteria. But quite often, they want to know what you're going to achieve with their gift, their donation, their investment. Think of it like that, not just what you're going to do. So again, really sort of focus onto that. And again, there's another session coming up at some stage later, all about approaching grant-making bodies. And then there's earned income. So just think, is there actually an opportunity for you to actually earn more money? Can you actually hire out your hall for children's parties? Again, I've just had my parents visit for a few days. They've left this morning. And again, we've been talking about all the things that they are doing in their church. And every Saturday, their church is used, it's a partnership with social services, where unfortunately a parent who doesn't live as part of their direct family, where they need to meet in some sort of supervised environment. My parents' church use every Saturday, their church hall is used for a contact centre. And again, it's a safe environment where estranged family members can meet together in a safe environment with other facilities around and other people around. So just think about the opportunities that maybe exist for your facilities to be hired out or used in a different way so that you can actually earn income. Who knows, you might be a major blockbuster. But as I say, we saw there's quite a lot of people from Yorkshire. There's an awful lot of TV and filming goes on in Yorkshire, but across the country, location finders are always looking for places. So get yourself registered with some of those. If you've got a very historic building, for example, just again, giving you a quick thought. So help is definitely a hand. We've already mentioned, the fundraising hub and the special section about church fundraising on the ecclesiastical website. But for those of you who are wanting especially to perhaps know a little bit more about specific grant funders for something specific that you're wanting to undertake, or and it might be the salary cost for that youth worker, to go back to my example, then make sure you go to that website, because here we are. This is an extract, a screenshot from that website, where you can actually search and put in, as you can see here, search for funding by theme by following the links, or view a full list of funders below. So I hope in that short time I've been with you, I've been able to give you a snapshot and help just get you thinking a little bit wider. First of all, what core costs, and think about the messaging. So think about you're asking for help, not asking for money, and think about what you actually achieve. So again, whilst you might say, with the rise in gas and electricity prices, we just want money for our heating. But think about, I always use what I call the so what factor. So why do you want it? And it's about people being comfortable, people lingering and loitering rather than having to wear 10 overcoats and then the minute the service is finished, they dash off. Again, it's that fellowship element. It's that contact. And many of you will have congregation members who from week to week, they never see anyone else. And this is a vital part of them avoiding being lonely and totally isolated. So again, I just want to thank you all for listening. I'm going to hand over now to Andrew. There we are. I'm going to give you, I think he's having a good hair day there, but it looks very similar there as he is on. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew, and for him to take you through some more thoughts before at 3 o'clock we actually start the Q&A session.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think some slides are going to appear on your screens. I'm going to take us through two things, really. So firstly, I'm going to take us through 20 things that you can do, just giving you some really very specific things that you can take away with you and actually just go and do. Perhaps even today, some of them you could put it on them and finish them this afternoon and tick them off your list. I'm not actually suggesting you can do all of these. You might not even do any of them, but I'm hoping that a list of very practical ideas will inspire you to make some changes that will make a big difference. Now, the effectiveness of some of these things is going to depend a little bit on your situation, because they're mostly kind of fairly sort of quick things. If you're the kind of things we're considering here, they might turn things around. If you're struggling with tens of thousands of shortfall, we're not going to fully cover. Cut your costs, having conversations with your denomination or your diocese or whatever, they are absolutely still worth trying. So 20 things that we can do. I think that next slide should come up.
Andrew, I'm just coming on to ask you to pause for a moment, if you don't mind. There's a couple of glitches. I'm going to stop my share and put it back up again because a couple of comments are coming through about that. And your sound's going intermittently in and out a little bit.
Okay, I will.
So let me stop the
that.
share because sometimes that's caused it. So I'll stop the share and start that again. Thanks everybody for letting us know that was affecting there. I've slides back up, Andrew, and I'm moving on. All I can suggest is carry on, but I might wave if it gets really
okay.
we can't hear. Yes, so I'll stay on screen for a moment.
How's that sounding now? Are good?
Yeah, seems to have joined up now. Great.
Okay. It's settled
I'll just
with
duck out
whatever it
when
was.
needed.
Okay, so 20 things that you can practically do to generate some core money, core income is what we're really talking about here. Number one, Jill's mentioned this, get a contactless donation point. Before the pandemic, cash transactions were already falling. So 80% of transactions in 1990 were cash, 27% were cash in 2019, 13% last year. The UK will be almost completely cashless by 2024, and cash machines will presumably become like phone boxes, sort of points of curiosity on the high street. So a contactless donation point is going to be really important as a quick and easy way for people to give. There are loads of types. There are portable ones. There are ones that, with batteries. There are ones that you plug into the mains. There are ones that work off a wired network, ones that work off the mobile network. Whether or not you are part of the Church of England, if you go to the Church of England's parish buying site, they've got a really great interactive survey which will show you the different options around contactless donation points and what you could use. Number two, publish income and expenditure in the notice sheets. One of the big barriers to people who come to your church, whether they come very regularly on a Sunday or just occasionally, is a lack of information. If people don't see a clear need, then they're not going to give you any money. So regular information is a huge help. And if you just once a month put in your notice sheet, because most churches still have some sort of paper notice sheet, don't we? Like, here is our target for how much money we should have got this month. Here is what we got. Here is the surplus or the deficit. That really helps people just go, oh, I need to put my hand in my pocket and make a gift. Because it's much easier to do it at that point when they go, oh, they were £200 short last month, or I can make a hole in that with my 20 quid or my 50 quid. If you get to the end of the year and then you tell people, we are £5,000 short last month, suddenly that's a much harder gap to close, isn't it? So publish information, income and expenditure regularly in your notice sheet. Number three. So you could do that this Sunday. You can get that sorted for this Sunday if you get your treasurer on board. Number three, write to regular givers annually. So as Jill said, one of the most important ways in which almost all of us now raise money is through people giving by standing orders and sort of regular monthly giving, which comes in sort of on the first of the month, or whatever date they choose. It's the same every month. And that was amazing for churches when that sort of model became widespread, probably about 20 years ago for most churches. Much improved predictability of when your funding was going to come in, massively reduced cost in handling all those kind of cash payments and banking money, absolutely brilliant. But it was not great for people regularly uprating their giving as their salaries or their pensions increased. Whereas when people used to put their money weekly into a plate, they often looked at, their April pay rise and they kind of started putting a bit more in the plate. So you end up with this phenomenon of the static giver, of they've given £20 a month by direct debit since 1995, and it's never changed, even though in 1995 they were earning 16,000 quid and they're now earning 75,000 quid. So there's a number of ways you can get around that. If you're in the Church of England, the parish giving scheme allows people to automatically increase their giving by inflation each year. That'll be interesting to see what happens with that next year, and whether people kind of opt out at that point. There are various direct debit giving programs that allow you as a church to do that yourself, because the difference between a standing order and a direct debit is that only the customer can change the standing order, whereas the person who is getting the money can change the direct debit. Obviously, you need to give their permission. But the simplest way is just to write annually, usually after the end of the tax year is best, to your regular givers, or those giving over a certain amount, at least, maybe if they're giving over £20 a month or something, and say, in the last tax year up until the end of March, you gave £5,000. Thank you so much. It was amazing. For next year, would you consider giving this much each month? Because that would help us keep up with inflation. So it's just prompting people to make that decision. It's also a really useful thing to do because for higher rate taxpayers, they can use that letter to remind them how much they gave over the whole year when they claim back the difference between basic and higher rate tax in their tax return. So it's a good thing to do. Number 4, ask for donations at stuff, your toddler group, whatever it is. Churches, I find, are really reluctant to charge anybody for anything on the basis that it will put people off coming, which is weird because weddings and funerals, which are the things that most people choose to do in church, are the things that we do mostly charge for. So it seems to me that actually people are quite happy to pay to have things in church if they feel like they're getting something that was actually what they wanted. So if what you do is a good thing, whether it's a toddler group or a church hall for hire or a men's breakfast, it is a really good idea to ask those who can afford it to give as least as much as it costs you to run it so that you can keep it free for the people who can't afford it, and your church can still be there in 100 years' time to carry on doing it for future generations. Especially if you've got a building, it's really important to charge people who hire it a rate that is comparable to other community buildings in your area, because otherwise you're just undercutting them, and that's not actually helping anybody in the end. So don't be afraid to ask for donations, to charge for things, because it actually helps those things to carry on for the sake of other people. And people who can afford it will not mind being asked. You don't need to be all heavy about it, but it's fine to ask. 5th thing you can do, get your youth group to raise their own funds. I have, between my wife and I, we have 7 young people in our family. And 5 of them are teenagers. And I can tell you that young people are innovative and resilient, especially when it comes to dealing with their siblings. But generally speaking, young people understand that stuff doesn't come for free, and they are thoughtful and they are creative, and they will raise you money if you suggest to them that it would be great for them to raise, a couple of £100 to fund some things that for the materials that they use, group uses, or whatever it is. The amount of money they raise will probably mostly be small, through bake sales or sponsored events or whatever it is they do, but it will make them feel like a real and significant part of church life in a way that young people often don't feel like a real and significant part of church life. And we always tell us, we must involve the young people. Well, don't just involve them in the fun things and the nice things, involve them in the things that are a bit more challenging and a bit more difficult, because that's
Just going to join in again, Andrew, and interrupt. I'm very sorry. The sound has gone completely now.
right.
So that's
Okay.
where people head up to was, getting young people to join in
Okay.
with the unfun things. The unfun things was
Great.
kind of your last point. And your sound, it seems to have come
I
back
think my
now.
Wi-Fi crashed. Am I back now? We good now?
Sounds all right again now. Go ahead
Excellent.
again.
Okay.
Thanks.
I turn off the offending bit of kit. Yeah, it's great to get young people to do stuff. Loads of young people can give. Telling the young people that they don't have to give in a kind of attempt to kind of get them to stay. We're desperate to keep our young people in the church. We mustn't ask them for anything. Actually, it's really misguided, because actually Christian discipleship always has a cost. And if actually you're not prepared to introduce the fact that, being a follower of Jesus is not necessarily easy all the time, you're not actually really setting them up to help them in their life. And of course, in the long run, it's unsustainable. If we have a generation of people who think that, it's not their job to give, the church is going to die. Next thing to do, number 6, have a legacy leaflet. Jill mentioned legacies. Having a little leaflet that explains them is dead simple to do, and possibly the single most effective thing you can do to raise lots of money. Legacies in total to charities were £800 million in 1990 in Britain, £3 billion in 2020, that's doubling even after inflation, and will be £5 billion in 2030. They're particularly great for churches because churches look after people, literally, don't we, from the cradle to the grave. And many members of your church will not have left you a legacy in their will, not because they don't want to, because they haven't thought about it or they haven't got round about it to it. So have a little leaflet that just says, here is, you know, why you should leave as legacy. Here's like how we would use money that people leave. Here are the charity details that your solicitor needs to put in the will, and that will really help people. And then perhaps also encourage them to let you know if they've done it so that you can thank them. 7, sign up to email newsletters from the Community Foundation and your local CVS. Often there are local funding opportunities that come around. They're often only open for a month or 6 weeks or so for all sorts of little grants for either core costs or things you do already. And if you want to know about them, the best places are to be on the email newsletters from your community foundation, which will be for your historic county that you're in. So you might be in Northumberland or Leicestershire or whatever. So the community foundation for that area, or your local council for voluntary service or CVS. They almost all have a newsletter and they almost all include funding opportunities. So get online, go on their websites, sign up for their e-news and check it out when it arrives each week or so. Number 8. Hold a typical event. Hold a typical event. The church fate is much derided, and if you believe Midsummer Murders or Miss Marple, it's also lethal, but it is profitable. That sort of event, whether you're in an urban or a rural area, great way of engaging people who don't normally attend services, but who want to feel that the church is part of their community. You can ask all sorts of people who are not regulars or even other organisations to help you out with stalls and volunteering, especially if a proportion of the money you raise isn't going to you, and splitting it like 50-50 or something with, say, I don't know, at the moment, a charity for Ukraine or whatever that good cause takes your fancy, is a really good way to engage a wider audience than you might get if it was just for church. Always consider, obviously, what other events are happening locally, have a wet weather plan, all that kind of stuff. And remember that volume is the key. People don't spend loads of money at these events, but if you can get lots of people to come, work with the local church school if there is one, make sure it's all over social media, all that kind of stuff. Lots of people, small amounts of money adds up to quite a lot in the end. Also worth remembering that John Lennon and Paul McCartney met at a church fete, and if so, if we stop doing church fetes, there may not be the next Beatles, and that would be sad. Number 9, hold a historical event. In Bedfordshire, there's an ancient tradition of carrying a 51 kilogram, 100-weight sack of potatoes, sort of early Iron Man, which was revived by a local church in Bedfordshire with 20 kilo bags of potatoes, because we've all got weaker, and lots of potatoes-themed activities across a weekend for all ages. I thought that was a great thing that showed the church was connected to the local community, invested in its area, raised some money, good fun. Maybe there's something historical in your particular locality that you can use to kind of tie in and get an event going. Number 10, hold a quirky event. I've read about churches doing paper aeroplane racing in their building. I've read about churches who had a festival of fish. It wasn't even a seaside location. Churches have done all sorts of odd things to raise money as events. Now, the advantage of those kind of quirky events is they are much more likely to get media or sort of social media attention in advance because they're different. If you go, we're having a festival of fish, people they'll repost that on Facebook. You might get an article in the local paper about it before it happens. So it helps to generate kind of interest in numbers of people coming. Now, you do really have to think about whether it's going to work for you and whether people want to come and whether it fits with who you are in your particular building or your location. So, for example, near where I live is the Airbus factory just down the road, and they build wings for jet planes. So I think a paper aeroplane thing might work in the kind of area of North Wales that I live in, because it kind of resonates with, I could get Airbus on board and we could do some sort of fun stuff with that. But that might not work somewhere else. So think about something. Is there something quirky that it works for you because of the people that you've got, because of the place where you are? What could you do that's just a little bit different and will get some attention? Number 11, sponsor a thing. There's loads of evidence that people like to associate their giving with something really concrete and specific. So if I give 100 quid to Macmillan, say, it's quite hard to get excited about paying 0.2% of a Macmillan nurse's salary and costs. But it's much more easy to get excited about knowing that that £100 is the cost of one home visit by that nurse to somebody who's got cancer or their family. You see, so making it concrete, making it specific really helps motivate people to give. So you can sponsor a thing that embodies the project that you're doing. You're doing a project which involves building something with 1,000 bricks, and the project is £100,000, and £100 sponsors a brick. People go, oh, okay, I paid for that much of this project. I can make a connection with that thing. It can be a bit more abstract than that. So we've got a case study I'll come to in a minute of a church that got people to sponsor minutes. So we'll come back to that one. Number 12, you can speak to your local councillor. Local authorities have been clobbered in the last 10 years for money, as you probably know, but most district and county councillors still have access to small grants they can distribute to local good causes just on their own say-so. And then there are funds often from mayors and lord mayors that go to local charities, and local councils often have knowledge about small grants from the council and from other bodies in your local area. So it's well worth keeping your local councillor informed about stuff that you're doing, making sure you invite them to things, connecting them. They too are trying to serve your community. So it's absolutely worth making sure that they are part of what you're doing, both for your actual ministry and for fundraising. Number 13, you can use the energy footprint tool, particularly if you're in the Church of England, though anybody can, I think, actually go on and use the tool. It's not a fundraising tip directly, but it really helps you to understand how you use fuel and energy as an organisation in your building and where you can make savings. And it's a really important, I noticed in the questions we had submitted in advance, quite a few about environmental projects. Using an energy footprint tool, really understanding what you're spending on, is a vital first step in helping you raise funds in future for new heating systems. I've done a whole series of webinars for the Church of England Environment team. I think if you Google, or other search engines are available, Church of England Environment fundraising webinars or something, anything like that, they'll come up. So I won't repeat that 3 hours of content now, but it is there on the internet and gives you loads of detail on that. Bottom line is not much funding specifically for environmental projects at the moment, though I think there will be more coming down the pipe in the next few years. But there are definitely funders who will help you with capital costs of low carbon works like LED lighting and heat pumps as part of bigger projects. But check out the energy footprint tool or something similar first to get you started. 14, take part in Heritage Open Days. If you've got a listed building, consider joining Heritage Open Days. This year, they're the 9th of September and the kind of week after that. You can't charge for entry if you're part of Heritage Open Days, but you can ask for donations from visitors using your new contactless donation point, obviously. And Heritage Open Days offer the opportunity to register your event on their website, which is a national website, lets lots of people know it's happening. Talk to your local civic society. Most places have one. Maybe you can partner with other places doing Heritage Open Days in your area to publicise each other's events, guided tours, bell tower visits, opening up the crypt, whatever it might be. Really good way to get more people into the church making donations. 15, projectify. Basically what I mean by this is think about the things that you already do, that you just think of as day-to-day business as usual, you know, with the local youth group or your lunch for older people or toddlers or whatever it is, and go, maybe that's not just core costs, maybe that's actually a project. And maybe somebody would fund that as a project. So I can turn it into a project and go, well, it's got, you know, these are the costs, this is what we're spending on this is the amount of time we're putting into it. Now it's a project, and I can take it to some funders and go, can you fund this project, this thing? It's a really good way to try and move things from that category of hard to fund core costs to slightly easier to fund projects that people might give you money for. 16. Running out of time, so I'm going to crack on. Make sure your online giving is working and visible. Loads of people now choose to give online, especially if you've got people who love your church but don't live near you. So maybe you're in a university town and lots of people have been in your church and then moved away. Maybe there's some particular feature of your church, an architectural thing or whatever, that attracts a wide audience from outside the particular place where you are. Really, the only way they can give is online. So make sure that you have something on your website that works for people to give by credit card or whatever. And there's loads of people who will supply that for you, like CAF and Stewardship and others. And more importantly, make it visible, make it one click from the homepage to the giving thing. So I did one on a church this morning just to test this, and it took me 10 clicks to get to the bit where I could actually make a donation. I was just bored, and I was doing it to find out whether it could be done. Whereas if I was actually there to make 20 quid donation, I probably would just given up and not bothered. So make sure online giving is working and visible. What are we up to? 17. Have text giving set up for events. Not widely used now, but it's really great still for events text giving. So, you know, you're having a concert, sort of classical music concert, and you've got 100 people in the room or 200 people in the room, however many turn up. If you have a thing that is like text St. John's 5 to 82035 to donate £5, that is a really easy way for people to donate £5 while they're sitting there in the actual thing. So they don't have to get up and move to your new contactless donation point. They can do it while they're sitting down. A whole bunch of people will run those accounts for you. Just Google text giving. Generally costs nothing to set up an account, so it doesn't matter how you use it. It's there for when you want it and you've got an event. 18, nearly there. Not quite free cycle. You don't want to run a charity shop. Well, you might run a charity shop, and actually that would be quite a good way of raising money, so consider that. But you can still make money from people in your church selling small items. So one church I'm involved with has a Facebook group where people from the church and people who don't go to the church but just live in the sort of community say, you know, they post and they go, I've got this thing. And someone else goes, oh, I'd like that thing. And they leave it in a cupboard at church with a label on it with who it's for and the date that they put it there, so it doesn't end up staying there for months. If it doesn't get collected, it gets thrown away. And then the person comes, so you don't need to arrange to meet them, because then they come and they take it out of the box of things and they put a donation in the money box or another use of your contactless donation box. And it's very clever, because you don't end up with a charity shop where you've got loads of stuff hanging around, but you can actually make quite a bit of money. And the church that I'm thinking of makes about £1,000 a year from doing this. So worth a punt. 19, plan and run an annual giving Sunday. This is the biggie. I have seen churches go from £50,000 a year in regular giving to £100,000 a year in regular giving within a month, just by having a really well thought out gift Sunday. Essentially, spend some time over 2 or 3 Sundays, but with one Sunday kind of designated as a time for people to bring gifts, when you talk through with the church family, what are we doing? What is our vision for the next few years? Why do we need money? What are we going to use the money for? What difference is it going to make? What impact are we going to have on this community? And get people to go away and to think and to pray about what they're going to do, and then to bring back a form where they sort of pledge to change their giving. They might reduce their giving, they might start giving for the first time, they might change their regular giving, whatever they'll do, but actually connect people with that vision and purpose and why their giving matters, and people will give. As I often say, God has got lots of money, it's just sitting in his people's bank accounts, and it needs to move from those bank accounts to places where it's doing more good. Finally, number 20, remember that the cavalry isn't coming. This is quite connected to the previous point. People kind of look and kind of think that someone else is going to save them. Maybe you're an Anglican here and you think, well, the church commissions have got £9.2 billion worth of assets. That's loads of money. Can't they come and solve our problems? Well, no, basically. That's not actually all that much money. And if they gave it all away, then you'd have to pay for everything forever, for the bishop's salary and all that kind of stuff. For comparison, in Germany, the government gives £9 billion a year to churches. Yeah, so that illustrates the scale of the challenge that we have. Okay, there's no cavalry on the horizon. So absolutely, fundraising from trust and grants is completely possible. Big funders like National Lottery Heritage Fund, they've got a part to play. But in the end, the ministry of the church today has got to be mainly funded by the Christians attending the church today. That's the bottom line. Through generous giving, sometimes through sacrificial giving, through leaving our legacies, not maybe to to our kids who don't need all of that money, but to a parish that really does need all of that money. Through doing things that make our churches places people want to visit, want to worship in, and want to give to. And that is a really hard task, but it is absolutely a worthwhile one. and that can support our work of bringing spiritual and practical help to generations to come and to preserving our heritage. We've got to do this because no one else is going to do it for us. And it's 2 minutes past 3, so we should just take some questions, I think. Because I think there's a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jill and Andrew. And I'll come to some questions now. I just wanted to point out, in case people hadn't been seeing it, and yourselves, Jill and Andrew, the amount of information that is being shared in the chat about little pointers, referrals to useful websites, all those kinds of things. So we'll definitely make sure to get that chat summarised and over to Ecclesiastical so that all those references and points of call are in there for you. And it's a great read just to hear of some of the events, the types of events Andrew might have been talking about there, but the things that people have done, there's music marathons, but there is also a teddy bear parachute jump that you might want to look into.
I'm loving that.
Yeah, and Yells and Bells, where we display wedding dresses and christening robes and invite other sort of providers in the area to take part and exhibit and pay for that exhibit, those kinds of things. So those events sound fabulous, and we'll get those in. Yeah. Can I start with a couple of clarification questions? Yeah, clarification, it's easy for me to say. Well, clarification questions, please. Andrew, just to come to you with a question from Colin Bonner, which was just for some clarification as well. Just that, he was always told that, you don't confuse things by adding "please pay more" to an annual thank you letter to regular givers. Whereas I think you were suggesting add that to the thank you letter. I think it's this debate between, do we separate out the thank you from the further ask? That might be the brunt of it.
Yeah, great question.
I'm representing that column.
Yeah, really great question. I mean, I think if I was running a sort of, a big Christian charity, and I was sending hundreds of letters to donors, absolutely, I'd separate out the thank you from the next ask. But I think in your own church, where these are basically people who are, especially if you're segmenting it, you're only sending it to people who are maybe giving more than 20 or 30 pounds a month. These are people who are already really committed to what you do. They almost certainly come quite often. You all know each other, and therefore I think like wrapping the things up together is not a problem. But absolutely, if you would rather separate those two things, particularly if you have a gift day at another point in the year, you can do your annual thank you statements, at the middle of April, and you can do your letter asking for more in September or whatever. That's absolutely fine too. So either approach, I don't think it's massively problematic though to do them both together in this context.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks. There you go, Colin. A bit of clarification there. Again, a couple of things on contactless, and Jill, maybe start us off, because you'll remember better than I do how much we talked about these things, and you might refer people to previous recorded webinars and things like that. But there was a question around, can you advise on contactless payment options? There was concern around Wi-Fi limitations within certain areas or within certain buildings to run that contactless option. Anything more you can help with there?
Well, you say, contactless is great. And I like to think of, yes, it's more than just that little sort of, where you put in your card with the chip and pin bit in against the machine. That's part of it. It's, where people can use a debit card or a credit card to make a payment. As you would, even my local fish and chips shop won't even take money anymore. They've gone totally cashless. So, and as somebody said, QR codes, they are again so easy to set up. And from some of the other sessions, we've done quite a bit on that. But QR codes, as Andrew mentioned again, and backed up with something I just mentioned in passing about text to give. Again, just Google that. They are so easy to run. And things like, because again, it was partly from the bells and the yells comment, I was sharing about, flower festivals and also Christmas tree festivals, which is a great way to bring people in from the community, but also when they come in, want to donate or give them the opportunity, because a lot of fundraising, somebody said it is about relationships, totally agree. But also one of the other basic rules of fundraising is if you don't ask, you don't get. And also, if you don't ask, people think you've got enough. And really, to pull on Andrew's point about, have a legacy leaflet, a gift about leaving a gift in your will. Again, some people are familiar with the term legacy, others much prefer the term, just what it says on the tin, leaving a gift in your will. But if you don't actually share these things, people just think, oh, they mustn't do it. So by having things like QR codes, even in the ladies or in the gents above a urinal, when people are having that cup of coffee that you possibly don't make a charge for, again, taking up Andrew's point, if we don't charge, they might, people think, oh, they've got enough money. We might say, a voluntary contribution. Otherwise, we won't be able to do this next week or next month or whatever. But again, possibly, having that option because people don't necessarily have £1, £2 in their pocket. So use things like the QR codes, things like text to give. And again, it is so easy to set up. Somebody said about donor, it's not good to know in, it's D-N. I can't now spend it off the top of my head now, but the person who put it in the chat spelt it right. It just misses the first O out of it. But again, you can, some of that can link to tax effectiveness as well. But otherwise, that's where part of your, the gift aid small donation scheme, it's about knowing your organisation has taken on donations where you weren't able to get a gift aid declaration actually completed.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Andrew, would you like to add anything or anything you need to add? Wi-Fi limitations?
No, so I've put a link in the chat, which is a really helpful resource on choosing contactless machines that's run out of the Church of England's setup, where they help you kind of work out, do you have power, do you have mobile reception, and then kind of work your way through a sort of decision tree. That's a really useful link. Okay, so that's there as well, everybody. Thank you very much. Just a couple of the questions that had been submitted in advance as well, almost to refer you elsewhere if you don't mind. But people were asking about, can you help me with these enormous and complicated forms that I have to fill in and all the rest of it. There is another webinar on writing applications and all that complicated form stuff will come into that. I'll make sure the date for that goes into the chat before I close this as well. And then Jill, Andrew, as you always expect, no matter what you're coming to talk about, people are going to ask you where the money is. Yes. So while we're not talking specifically about where some of this money might be, some pointers around things like, the big church roof projects, the capital projects, reworking things so that we're more environmentally sound these days. Pots of money, directions, where are you going to point us?
Well, over to you, Andrew, first. Talk about some of those things we were chatting before we came on.
Good point, actually, Andrew, because I thought the other thing that I wanted to pick up in that conversation was the fresh expressions. If you could update people what you know about where that might be up to.
Okay,
a couple of people have mentioned that. Thank you.
So big capital projects. I guess the first thing to say is come back to the next webinar on capital projects because you'll get much more detail then. Second thing to say is, generally speaking, sort of rough rule of thumb for most projects is that your maximum external funding is normally about 50 to 60%, and you're going to have to find the other 40 to 50% internally. It's not always completely true, especially if you have a very expensive grade 1 listed building or something. But generally speaking, you have to find half the money yourself, and I would start with that half because that's the easiest place to start. And then there are probably about half a dozen generally quite well-known funders of church building projects who will consider giving you a grant. National Lottery Heritage Fund, obviously by far the biggest of those. Garfield Weston Foundation, what was All Churches Trust, and I've just had a mental blank about what it's now called because they changed their name a month ago. But anyway, if you Google All Churches Trust,
someone will put it in the chat. Yeah.
Excellent. Benefact, yes, of course it is. Brilliant. Then National Churches Trust, again, focusing on sort of listed buildings, and a few others. So there's a sort of well-known cadre, and there are various websites that will help you find them. There's a guide on the Ecclesiastical Fundraising Hub. There's a guide in the Church of England's fundraising resources. And And then there's a guide in the Churches Conservation Trust. They have a list of funders as well. So 3 places you can go to look for lists of funding.
And also if you're a heritage building, is say the Heritage Alliance, again, their website has got a funding search. Also, we're here, you know, and Kathy is very much the DSC, and I'm involved with the DSC. Funds Online is a resource, but also I know there was a mention made before about community CVSs or community action, as they're called. Again, they're infrastructure organisations. They themselves are charity, but they're there in communities to support the voluntary sector. They often know of local church, of local funds that are particular of interest. The community foundations, again, lots of different counties. It's sometimes a mixture of counties or parts of counties. I think there's a Kirklees one, but you know, there's definitely, you know, an Essex Community Foundation if you're in that part of the world. And whilst they can't do it for religious activities, usually their grants, again, some of it is for the community focused elements. So again, if it's that youth work or if it's to have toddler group, because again, it's not about, and dare I put it in, and I hate that thing, but put it in inverted commas, it's not about preaching and converting to Christianity. It's about providing a community resource, a place where perhaps new mums and dads can come together with their toddlers and have an activity together, but also support each other. So again, don't focus on it's the church, but you want extra for your heating bill. Whilst I know Andrew said about, you know, your toddler group, ask them to pay for it, but also that's something by having that you know, taking place every Tuesday morning, you can go to some of these grant makers that won't fund you for a Sunday heating bill, but might fund you for that Tuesday morning. Not that you're going to say Tuesday morning heat is £2.50 or whatever. I know I'm out of touch. No, I'm just pulling figures out of the air. But just think of it, as I said in my little bit, think about packaging things up and make it something that's attractive to someone who possibly an individual, company, organisation who wouldn't fund something that's religious, but is a way that you as a religious organisation can actually fund those core costs to enable you to keep the doors open for lots of different elements of your community.
Fab. Thank you very much. We've only, you know, less than 10 minutes left, and I want to leave a couple of minutes for a couple of wrap-up points at the end as well. There's a question, I'm really putting it to you as panelists. You'll never ask me to chair your session again. This is like, you know, unfortunately, it's anonymous. That might be somebody's sort of name tag or whatever that they have attached. So sorry, I can't credit you with the question. But for me, it's kind of, you've already spoken about the potential limitations for funding for churches opposed to charities sometimes, and that, you know, while trusts and foundations are out there, let's look to the community. So here's one. We are a community in one of the most deprived parishes in England. Trying to get more out of the community, the disposable income just isn't there or is very limited. So, you know, how do we attract people to those events, and what advice might you have? So it's a tough one, isn't it? You're welcome.
We're both sitting back waiting for the others.
We're just both very polite.
And I think the anonymous question, we'll expect a broad stab, not an absolute fait accompli. But yeah, some broad thinking would be welcome, perhaps, because it's that crunch point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I guess there are various things to say on that. So number one is, I think that the relative generosity of poorer people in Britain is very well documented. So yes, people with less money have less money, obviously. People with less money also give a lot more of the money that they do have as a percentage to charitable causes, which is basically a polite way of saying that rich people are mean, which is just a true fact in Britain today, relative to poorer people. So don't despair about what you can do. And I think it is like, especially, I mean, I go to a church which is itself on the edge of a kind of divide between a wealthy area and a much less affluent area. And I think we can sometimes, because most of the people who go to the church live in the wealthier bits, we can be potentially slightly patronizing about the ability of people in other communities to give. And so don't assume that people can't give. If they can't, then they can't, but we should not ask them because we've decided that they can't. So I guess that'd be my first thing to say. Second thing to say is, you know, the form, if you are in an established denomination of any sort, then the formulas of the way in which funding works should and generally do help to cover the fact that there are some issues, and you will be eligible both often for funding internally within your denomination and for more trusts and foundations than you would otherwise be. So, for example, just working with a church that runs a big food bank, and they had a letter this morning to say they've got £10,000 in the Trust House Foundation towards their food bank work. And Trust House Foundation only fund basically if your building is located in the most deprived 10% of the UK. So there are a number of, and I think increasingly big trust funders are well aware of the sort of needs of poorer communities and are more targeting the, like, your ability to get funds is increased if you are in one of those communities. Now, it doesn't help you with the fact you still got to fill the form in, and finding people with the skills to do that can be more challenging in poorer communities and all of those kind of things. But there is more money around in terms of trusts and foundations. Again, Lottery Heritage Fund, much more likely to give you a grant if you're in a poorer community, because they know that on the whole, people in those communities are less likely to engage with heritage, and that's what they really want to happen.
Yeah, it's double win for them, isn't it?
I was also going to add as well, you know, we talked about some events, and whilst you say some of them won't raise a lot of money, but it's about providing a service and facility that widens to the community. So when it's school holidays, you might be able to do an activity, you know, even that summer fair on a Saturday, you know, in the middle of summer, you know, it's an activity for that community to come to. But then they you know, by asking them to make a contribution to attend, they're getting something back. And I think this is another key thing, is if they're getting something back. And that's what I was also just going to mention about the food bank idea as well. So you as a church might decide, because of the constituency that you're covering, if you don't already run a food bank, it might be a good idea. So you're providing a facility, a service to your whole community, not just your congregation. But also that in itself will open other funding doors to you and will actually help cover some of your other costs as well. And think about partnering. I know what Andrew was saying about people coming from more affluent areas using those churches, but also think about possibly partnering up with churches in different parts of your you know, your district or whatever, or even in different parts of the country. So almost this twinning concept that goes on, and use that where people can actually help you to survive as well. I've seen that work successfully. So I want you just to throw in a couple of extra things to what Andrew shared as well. So brilliant.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jill. We are pretty much out of time. Richard, I did see your question about people's experiences of the benefits in using fundraising consultants for major projects. I'm going to advocate it, because you could well end up with somebody like Jill Jolly or Andrew Evans on your table there. So, but if they can think of anything afterwards, and we can just put a quick thing in the chat, we'll try and answer that so that it comes all together as well. The other things that have come up in the chat, you know, we always say at Directory of Social Change, don't let anybody tell you there's a shortage of money. There's the world is awash with money, and people have put in some really interesting things there, you know, whether the Community Foundation has helped them to fund a lift, or the local authority has provided an in-kind offer of extending their Zoom services and Zoom functions so that the church could connect with the local care home and so on. So there's some really interesting and innovative things in there. Yeah, it's hard to believe that the world is awash with money sometimes, but it is definitely out there, even in the government, you know. They never run out of money for the riot police, do they? That's what we always say in Liverpool. never a shortage of funds when we want the riot police to come out and they want us all to stop protesting or campaigning about different things. We will put a summary of things into the chat, make sure that's cleaned up. Thank you so much. I've said it before, those that have been at these sessions before know that I speak so highly of how much community there is in these particular sessions that Ecclesiastical are running. How much sharing is going on is honestly phenomenal compared to some of the webinars that I might sit in through the course of my work. So that's really good news as well. and that I will also put in the dates. We referred to future workshops, writing funding applications and capital projects. I'll put the dates in for those, and definitely join us for those. And also don't forget that you can go back to look at some of the other things, like the digital fundraising webinar that's already on the ecclesiastical website. Might tell you a little bit more about QR codes, or somebody will definitely have asked Jill a question about the contactless system preferences there, and things like that. So that information is all in there. From us, it's thank you. To Ecclesiastical, it's thank you for inviting Directory of Social Change. But from both Ecclesiastical and Directory of Social Change, a huge thank you to both Jill and Andrew. They bring a wealth of experience, and I know that you've only touched the surface of their knowledge as well. So watch this space to watch out for more of them. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.